This is your introduction to calligraphy. To start off, you need to know your materials, so I'm going to show them to you now. First and most important, you need a pen. Calligraphy pens are metal. They have a bit of a point to them, and mine are a little bit fancy, and they have this additional metal piece here that will help hold more ink in your pen so you can write for longer. You also need ink. I have these little bottles of ink here that you're going to use. To practice, you're going to need to use some practice paper like I have here. And I also always keep just a scratch sheet near me, and I'll explain why in a minute. When you set up, you're going to need a practice paper, a bottle of ink nearby. I'm going to put mine off in the corner here. And then I keep a paper towel nearby just for any messes, so I keep it just out of frame here. And I start by opening up my ink bottle, and there's a little dropper inside that we're just going to ignore, so I get the extra ink off the dropper, and I'm placing it on my paper towel just out of frame. When we use our pen and our ink, we take the pen and we dip it into our ink. And we want to dip it to just above this golden metal part, okay? If your ink bottle's too full, you'll dip it too high, and we don't want that. We don't want too much ink on our pen. If you feel like you've got too much ink on your pen, what you're gonna do is wipe your pen against the side of your ink bottle to get off the excess. Then, just to be sure, I'll take my scrap paper, and I'm just going to draw a few lines just to get the excess ink off of my pen. Now those are looking nice and smooth, so I'm ready to begin. Before we start writing any actual letters, you need to learn the basic strokes. There are 8. The first stroke is very, very simple. It's an upward stroke, also called an entrance stroke, because it's how we start most letters. An entrance stroke looks like this. Now, I hold my pen using my index finger, my middle finger, and my thumb. I rest the pen on my middle finger, and I pinch it with my index and my thumb. You would do it the same way if you are right-handed, but I am left-handed. Left-handers, you are going to have the added challenge of trying not to drag your hand through your ink. In order to avoid that, I recommend writing from beneath your letter, okay? So you hold your pen like this, and when you write, you move from below, so that way your hand is never going to be in your ink. So we're starting the entrance stroke. When we write, we hold the pen with our hand, but we write using our full arm. Oops, knocking things over. So we write using our full arm. So what I'm going to do is I place my pen at this bottom dotted line. This is called the X line, this space within the dotted line. That's the X line. That is where the majority of our letters will live. So I start by placing my pen at the bottom of the X line, and I'm going to push the pen up. Now when I push up, I need to push at the same angle as the lines you see on your practice paper. That is the angle all of your lines should go up at. We never go straight up and down in calligraphy. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my X line, and I'm going to push up. Okay? And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to push up, and push up, and push up, push up. You're going to do this all the way across the first line on your page. notice that I'm going pretty slow, okay? And I'm not pushing with my wrist, I'm actually pushing my whole arm up, okay? Now, eventually, I'm gonna get to a point where my line might start looking a little bit streaky. When that happens, it's time to dip again. So I'm actually working my way. My pen's doing a good job of holding on to the ink. And I think my lines are getting smoother as I work my way across too. But you can see right here, or maybe you can't see, but my line started to get streaky. So I know it's time to dip, wipe off the excess on my ink bottle, and then grab my scrap paper and just do a couple lines to get any excess ink off my pen. And then I'm gonna push up some more. Remember, do your best to go with the slant on the lines, okay? So I'm starting to lose my slant a little bit, so I know that I need to adjust. Maybe I need to go a little bit slower. Okay, calligraphy, the number one thing to remember is that you can go super, super slow. And normally, it will give you better results. So that is the entrance stroke. The second stroke you need to know is the downstroke. Now, this is very similar, except instead of pushing up with your pen, you're going to be pulling down at the same angle as before. So I'm gonna get some more ink on my pen just in case. Wipe off the excess and use my scratch paper just to make sure that I've got a good amount of ink on there. Then I'm gonna start at the top of my X line, and I'm gonna push down with my pen, and I'm gonna pull down. Now you should be noticing something very important right now. This line, this downstroke, is thicker than a entrance stroke or an upstroke. Calligraphy is pretty and different than normal handwriting because downstrokes are thicker than upstrokes. What is happening is in my pen tip, there is actually a split in the middle of that metal tip. And when I push down on the tip, I'm actually splitting the metal, just slightly widening it so that the line will become a little bit thicker. Now you have to really get the hang of putting the right amount of pressure on this. If you push too hard, the tip is going to go too far apart and you'll actually get two separate lines like this. Okay, it doesn't always work. See? So you have to really think about how much pressure you're putting on your pen. Looks like I might need some more ink. So I dip, wipe the excess on my ink bottle, and use my scratch paper just to get off any excess ink that I don't need. And I'm going to keep going, doing downstrokes across the whole line, trying hard to keep the same slant as the guidelines on your paper. Okay, nice and slow and steady is the name of the game here. Remember to write using your whole arm. Don't just write with your wrist. Move your whole arm. You will get much steadier results. Okay, I'm not going to do the whole page because that'll get boring. Pause here if you need to and continue across your whole line. The next stroke is getting a little bit more complicated. We're going to do the oval. So I'm going to get some more ink on my pen just in case. Wipe off any excess. And use my scratch paper to get off any extra. Then I need to make an oval. You're gonna watch really closely for this, so I'm gonna zoom in for you. Okay, to do an oval, here's what happens. You are going to take your pen, put it at the top of the X line. And you're gonna go over and pull down and go over again at the bottom of the X line. And then you're gonna push and go back up. Again, you are going to start at the top, move slightly across, pull down at that slant, go over and back up. One more time, you're gonna go start at the top of the X line, go over, pull down, move over at the bottom of the X line, and go back up. Once again, top of the X line, over, down, over, and back up. Top of X, over, down, over, and back up. Now, as you do this, hopefully your ovals start to get better and better. You start to get the hang of it. You can move a little smoother. See, even me, and I've done this before, my ovals are getting better, my slant is more consistent, my lines look smoother. That is what should be happening to you as well. So the key with calligraphy is practice. You do it over and over and over until it's perfect. Okay, so one more time. I'm going to go top of the X line, over, down, over on the bottom, and back up to connect. That is the oval. And notice that my slants are staying consistent enough for a beginner. Consistent enough, that's for sure. The next line is called an underturn. I'm going to get some more ink, wipe off the excess, scratch paper to get the excess off again. An underturn is similar to an oval, but we aren't going to connect it. So what is going to happen is we're going to start at the top of the X line. We are going to move down and start to go around at the bottom and then go back up. Okay? Top of the X, down and around and back up. Top of the X line, go down and around and back up. Top of the X, down and around and back up. Down and around and back up. Notice that I am doing the slant here. My slant is at the same angle as my guidelines. Okay? And once again, as I'm making more and more, my lines are getting smoother and more consistent because I'm getting the hang of it. Practice makes perfect here. I know it's going to get annoying sometimes, but this is how you make beautiful calligraphy. Down and around and back up. Down and around and back up. Down and around and back up. And so on. You're going to do the rest of this line. The next type of stroke that we need to practice is the opposite. It is an overturn. So I'm going to get some more ink on my pen, wipe off the extra, use my scratch paper, and I'm going to do the overturn. And it's literally the opposite of the underturn. I'm going to start at the bottom of my X line. I'm going to start from the bottom, push up, around, and pull back down. Push up and around and pull 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 down. So this one I don't think is going quite as smoothly for me, but that's okay. That's what practice is for. I'm going to push up and around and back down. So something that I might need to do is slow down. I think I'm going a little bit fast, and it means that I'm not getting as good results. So I'm going to go a little slower. Slowly push up and around and back down. And I like that one better. I'm going to push up and around and pull down. Push up and around and pull down. Up and around and pull down. And I'm starting to get the hang of it a little bit more. Eventually, once I've practiced a lot, everything should be looking very consistent. All of my curves should look uniform. I'm not there yet. I'm still learning, but that's the direction, the goal we should all be working towards. So that was the overturn. Next is the compound. I'm going to get a little more ink, wipe it off, scratch paper to make sure I'm good. I'm going to move on to my overturn, my compound. With a compound, I'm going to combine the underturn and the overturn. I'm going to start like the overturn. Start at the bottom of my X line, push up, curve down, pull down, and then push back up. Okay, again, push up, curve, pull down, curve back up, push up, curve down, curve back up, push up, curve, pull down, push back up. I'm kind of losing my slant here, so I got to try a little harder on that. Push up, curve, pull down, curve back up, push up, curve, pull down, push back up, push up, curve back down, curve back up, push up, curve down, curve up, and so on. I'm starting to like my results a little bit better now, and I think my slant is starting to work a little bit better. So again, push up, curve down, curve up, push up, curve down, curve up, and so on. Try that all the way across your line. Now, we're going to get a little fancy. We're going to do something called an ascender. This is where the space above and below the X line are going to start to come into play. So I'm going to take my ink, get a little bit more, test with my scratch paper. Okay, there we go. I'm going to do an ascender now. This time, what's going to happen? I'm going to start at the bottom of my X line. I'm going to start at the top of my X line. I'm going to push up above into what's called the header and pull down to the bottom of my X line. Start at the top of my X line, extend into the header, pull down like so. At the top of the X line, curve to header, pull down. Top of X line, into header, pull down. I could maybe even try extending into the X line a little bit. So from X line, header, pull down. 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 Okay, and I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it. One thing about calligraphy is it is fairly loopy. So I am trying to get some of those loops in there looking nice and pretty. Okay, so one more time. Start in the X, loop into the header, and pull down. Start in the X, loop into the header, pull down. You're going to do that all the way across your line. And next, we have a descender. It's the opposite of an ascender. I'm going to get a little more ink for myself. Wipe off. Use my scratch paper here. And I'm going to do the descender. For the descender, I'm going to start at the top of my X line. I'm going to pull down into what's called the footer and loop around back into the X. Okay, start at the top of the X, pull down to the footer, loop back up. Top of the X, down to the footer, loop back up to the X. Pull down, loop. Eventually, you're going to learn little flourishes, or you can just kind of flick it away. So top of the X, pull to the footer, loop up. Top of the X, the footer, loop up. Okay? And it's just a little flick where I am lightening my pressure on my pen. Top of the X, into the footer, loop up, and lift and flick away. Top of the X, into the footer, loop and flick. Top of the X, into the footer, loop and flick. So you can see mine aren't perfect, but this is learning, okay? We're just practicing our marks. Loop and flick. That would be the bell. Top of the X, down, loop around, and flick up. You're going to do this across the rest, and then have one page. Whatever mark you did the worst on, practice in that last line on your page. These are the 8 marks that you want to make every single letter. So time practicing before you start learning your